Yeah, my name's Jyoti, and I have a lot of things I could sort of expose about the world that I've seen over time, but I think I feel a little bit moved to just talk about my personal journey a little bit in coming to the work that I do with Campesina. I feel really proud that I'm able to speak as a spokesperson for Campesina. It's a social movement of 200 million small-scale peasant farmers around the world. We're all active farmers, earning our living from the land and trying to live kind of a land-based lifestyle and earn our livelihood from it, just basically getting on with our lives. And I've been doing this for a little while now, over the last 4 years, working for Campesina. But I've come to that from just trying to find a job and a way of living that was something that I felt had meaning in my life. And I think, I was inspired to come to this because it was about mental well-being and about, your place in the world, really, and how that connects to the larger environmental crisis. And, I grew up in America. My father was a small-scale farmer in India, as being from a large peasant family there with 8 children, the oldest is often sent to school, taught English, to be able to go and get a job as a doctor or an engineer or something like that, they can go to the West then, my father went to America to become an engineer and sent back money for his family to be able to get that extra income. Something that was very common in the 60s and to this day, for families across the world to try and have this kind of progression towards development. But when I grew up in my American family with quite a lot of, being able to go to after-school clubs and all these sorts of things, I noticed that my father always missed being in the village. He always missed that sense of identity and connection to his family and the extended families that are in land-based cultures around the world. And he suffered throughout his life from real depression and that kind of disconnection of having to work all the time to buy all these things for our family to live in a nice house, and we did, and I had a good education and all those things. But after I went to university, there was one year, I was about 3 years into it, and I was doing development studies, and we were learning all about free trade agreements and the American way of life and this kind of thing. I went to India. I dropped out because my father, paid for me to go there because I'd never been out of the country before, and went and visited the village where my family was from, and realized that it was really beautiful the way people lived in the village there. People grew their crops, they ate all these nutritious different things that they did. My grandmother milked a cow, and she, all these great things. And there was that extended family, and the old people stayed with the family, and the kids were with mothers as they grew up, and the kids all played together in the village. And there's a lot of poverty, and there's a lot of things that they don't have. But what they did have is a sense of community, and I thought it was really beautiful. And I started volunteering for some organizations there for a little while, and realized that actually that way of life was being taken away from them, and that kind of agriculture that they were doing, where it was really diverse. People were growing all different sorts of crops from seeds that they saved for themselves, and they sold that food to their local community at the local markets, and they ate it themselves, and it was really nutritious, and they had a good way of life. That was being taken away by the whole export economy, because lots of those areas were being cleared, and lots of development money was coming in from banks to be able to convert it over so that they could grow, GM crops of sugar or cotton or all these sorts of things, to be exported out to the world to create all this stuff on the global market. And it was actually destroying a way of life that was actually really beautiful. So I met my husband, when I went back to America, and he happened to be a hedger living in the woods in England. He kind of dropped out. He was a generation, didn't know what he wanted to do with his life. He went to loads of raves, and that was great. And, and he was on the dole and whatever. We didn't know. Nobody knew what they wanted to do with their lives. And we had no money. So we moved into a little bender in Glastonbury. I got pregnant when I was like 23. And we lived in the forest there. We couldn't get any benefits because I was an immigrant, and that was the rules. Lived on £17.50 a week with no electricity, and we ended up having 4 children, and we raised them without any fossil fuels. We tried to live there with no electricity, and they were raised in the forest, basically. We grew our own food. We moved to a community called Tinker's Bubble in Somerset that's still there today, with all these families living. We built our own houses in the woods, grew what we did. We had horses, for plowing and taking the timber out of the forest. My husband taught himself how to make chairs, these beautiful Windsor chairs that steam bends the backs and all these kinds of things. And basically we taught ourselves how to earn our own livelihood from the land, and it was a wonderful way to bring up our children. I always had my babies tied to my back. We'd be picking beans, and they'd be back there like messing about, and they'd be eating strawberries and helping milk the cow, and just doing this stuff. And it's a great way to live. And I think to try and live a low impact lifestyle is something that you can achieve, and it is something that you can do, and it really can inspire your work. So I want to talk about the work that I do now, because, as Dorothy said, it's not enough to just try and change your lifestyle, but I know that lifestyle has power in it, and it has validity, and it is something that can create that kind of well-being for everybody on this planet, to be actually connected to what you do, and the fruits of your own labor, to be generating something that goes into the people that you know, and providing well-being to them. And that's what the ethos of living is that you're providing that passion and that sense of life to each other as a community, and helping each other, and passing that on to your children, and that sense of empowerment, that you're doing that something that is real and valid and makes this planet live. And that's what the peasant way of life is about, is that you're connected to the environment, and that connection to the universe, and all of everything that makes life worth living. And keeping that alive is what Via Campesina is about. It's about keeping that sense of the peasant way alive. It's called Via because that's the word that means life. And that's the essence of everything that we do. So that's what really fuels my activism. My mother is totally blind, and I noticed when I was trying to live my life here as a small-scale farmer, I've been farming for 20 years now with my children. My oldest daughter is now 23 years old. That it's actually quite a hard way to make a living. You sell your stuff at the market, people never pay what real price of food is really for the amount of love and attention you put into it. You get up every morning and milk your cows, and you put that amount of milk out there and you make that cheese. People never quite pay what it is, and it's like that universally for farmers around the world. And my mother's totally blind, and I noticed throughout her life she was always an activist fighting for disability rights. And she started a union for blind people in America, civil rights movement. Actually, it's a social movement, not a union. We started a union. She started a social movement for blind people to fight for their civil rights. And I watched her throughout her life, having encountered discrimination after discrimination in her life, actually work to change that over time. And working hand in hand with the movement for racial equality and for women's rights and all these other social movements that are out there. And as I tried to earn my living as a farmer here in the UK and realised that actually the voices of small-scale farmers are severely marginalised and discriminated against all over the world. Whenever you go to these international forums, when you go to the Food and Agriculture Organisation, when you go to Westminster, it's the NFU standing there as large landowners from the Country Landowners Association, always talking about farmers creating massive subsidies every year. And if you're a small-scale farmer, you never get that support because there's a 5-hectare cut-off point for getting subsidy or support here, from the government. And there's all sorts of issues facing farmers across the world. And I realized that actually what you need to do to change that is become a part of a social movement, become a part of a group of people who are facing the same issues as you, and work to change your conditions so that you can make them better in the world. And here in the UK, we never had a union to represent the interests of small-scale farmers. So I started talking to other people in our community, other people like us who had gone back to the land and tried to start their own farms, and we decided to form a farmers' union, to get together, to fight for our rights. And we joined with La Via Campesina, 200 million strong across the world, to try and fight for our rights across the world. And there's two concepts I'm going to go into now because I probably don't have much more time, that actually talk about La Via Campesina and what we do to change agricultural policy to reflect our interests, to make this world a better place, to shift massively climate change across the planet. There's two concepts we fight for. One is food sovereignty, the idea that every single person on this planet has the right to access all of the resources that they need in order to feed themselves and their communities in a way, and that have access to food from people that they can trust, that's produced in a way that doesn't destroy the ability of future generations to have food as well. And that's the easy way to kind of say what we mean by food sovereignty. And there's all sorts of more things connected to that. And the way that we produce our food is through a method of farming called agroecology. Right? There's all different things that fall under agroecology, but it basically, when you look at the global statistics for who feeds the world, right? 70% of the world's food is produced by small and medium scale and family farmers producing agroecologically, selling to their local community. 70% of the world's food. 30% is produced by large industrial corporate farms. You know, the kind that spray pesticides, the kind that use nitrate fertilizers, the kind that do factory farms. It's only 30% of the world's food supply. Yet when you go to these political places and try and hear about agriculture, they try and spin all the time, these corporations that dominate our food system, the idea that they feed the world. But it's not. It's small-scale farmers across the world, across Asia, Africa, Latin America, Europe, everywhere, that are actually providing the bulk of our world's food supply, using only 30% of the agricultural resources of this planet. So these studies that have been done on the international level say that 30% of the world's food is produced by industrial farming, but it uses 70% of the agricultural resources to produce only that 30%. And of that 30%, a huge percentage of that goes to food that's wasted. Almost a third of that is wasted. The rest of it goes to highly processed products that actually create tremendous health problems. It's highly processed, white breads and sugary foods and things that cause tremendous amounts of obesity. And a lot of it's for animal feed. That's very, very, through factory farms where they feed grains to animals that could actually be fed on byproducts of an agricultural system or on waste from other parts of the system, right? So it's a really, really inefficient way to feed this planet. And we, as small-scale farmers, actually understand how to look at what's in the environment around us, look at what landscape we're surrounded by. And it's the same, we work hand in hand with the Indigenous peoples movement, with Indigenous people around the world that know how to look at what's around you and find and eat what's around you and create those resources that keep us alive, keep us sustained by using them in a sensible way and recycling things back into the system. So my farm, we have, I've got apple orchards using old traditional Dorset varieties. We've got sheep underneath, grazing underneath the orchards. I keep 4 Jersey cows and I milk them and I give the whey that after I make the cheese back to my pigs. And then I grow loads of vegetables using the muck that I get off the fields, and the nitrogen comes from the air, into the grass, and that goes into the cow shit, which goes onto my vegetable areas. And then I make loads of jams and chutneys, and then we have a community processing center where 52 different smallholders in the area, and we all come together and we make cider together, and we have a really good laugh and banquets, and get parties and ceilidhs, and sometimes the dogs, kind of run around and drinking cider, and it's really fun, and it's a sense of community, and it's a sense of life. And we're creating an economy that is sustainable, that can go on forever. And everybody on this planet can have a good quality, a beautiful way of life if we can only think about how to transition to these systems that are sustainable and create something beautiful and glorious and diverse and wonderful to live off of. So what I'm doing right now is I work for the Land Workers Alliance, which is our union, which is a part of Campesina. I do an awful lot of work with the Food and Agriculture Organization, and we work as civil society to take the voices of farmers directly to the policymakers. We go into these forums and we speak our passion about what we do and try and convince them there is another way is possible to create life on this planet. It doesn't have to be about GM seeds and Monsanto, and we call out their bullshit all the time. Woo! And basically, we stand there and we sell it to them. And right now what's happening in the UK is that there's an agriculture bill that's going through Parliament and it's being debated because of Brexit. 47% of what happened with pulling out of the European Union, or what will happen if it does happen, it may not happen, is that 40% of that budget was going to agriculture. So we're going to have to completely rewrite our agricultural policy here in the UK. And I'm trying to get as stuck in as possible, because it's not enough just to live like this. I think we have to help everyone live like this. And what we're doing is trying to put really concrete policies into place. We're trying to propose things to the government that gives them that map, that gives them that that pathway to move towards. One thing we've been proposing is called the Whole Farm Agroecology Scheme, right? And we're trying to mimic the language that they use within these intergovernmental departments, and look at all their action plans, and look at the agroecology, the bill that's going through Parliament. And we try and take this passion that we've got and translate it into a language that fits all their boxes, ticks all their boxes, and call out all the bullshit of the multinational lobbyists that are there trying to say that they've got the path forward. And we believe that if we use agroecology here in this country, we've done studies, that we can produce 85% of the food that we need in this country using local farming systems like the one we have on our farm, multiplied out, scaled out, loads and loads of small and scale family farms, providing the diversity, the bulk of food that we need, right? And working hand in hand with the landscape, working with local communities, bringing in disadvantaged people to come and help work on the farms. We believe in community-supported agriculture and all these other concepts. Using the farms in a sustainable way, not using nitrates, not spraying pesticides, not using, GM seed, all of these things. And it's all quite technical, and I could go into the agriculture of it. But the thing is, we're asking government to integrate our work and our voice into the picture of what they're doing, because we can help develop the programs, because we know and we live this way all the time. And so we've got all these things like, what are the agri-ecological objectives you've got to do? How can you reward them? They're moving over to a system where they're going to reward public money for public goods. They're going to pay farmers to do things that are for the public good, right? And we've kind of outlined that. We said, well, what are the good things that we do by having this kind of farming system? And I've been running around, talking to loads of ministers, going up to DEFRA, 2 or 3 times a week sometimes, meeting with these ministers. And what I found, and what I want you to know and be empowered by it, is the fact that they're actually bloody listening. And I think sometimes you feel like, there's all these multinational corporations, and there's all these lobbyists, and there's all this stuff going on that's taking over our world. But actually, if you just get out there and try and make your voice and passion heard, people are human, we're all human, and other policymakers are human. Michael Gove is a human. I had lunch with him about a month ago, and I sat there and talked to him about this. And I said, look, we need agroecology, we need our small and family farms. They are what helps define our landscape and our sense of identity. It helps us build those connections. It helps us build that community, and it provides all those ecosystem services you're talking about. If you support our small-scale family farms doing this kind of work on the land, and he was like, okay. And I was like, look, can I be on the advisory panel to help develop some of these new schemes coming up? And he was like, okay. And the next week they sent an invitation. I was at the meeting yesterday in DEFRA, with them, helping them to develop this scheme. And the thing is, I think you just have to have that boldness. I said, look, my kids are on strike for climate change. They don't want it to happen. They grew up understanding what it's like to live in a forest and eat beautiful food. They don't want it to happen. All that bullshit you learn in school, is it enough if your planet's not just going to survive for their children's children? Get out there and do it, and tell that to people in power, that we can change this planet and we can reclaim everything about this planet, because our world is not for sale and we're going to do something about it. And they will listen. If they know it's possible, they will listen.